Hello there, Sword Friends. Today I have a visual tour for you of two swords that are on loan to me from Sword Friend Jon. Now, Sword Friend Jon used to have a YouTube channel, and Sword Friend Jon, if you are watching, please reinstate it. I know none of us were worthy of your wisdom, but please, you had some good stuff, so I hope you decide to rejoin the fold here. Anyway, Sword Friend Jon sent me two swords, and they are awesome. One is a Rick Barrett sword, one is a Chinese-made sword of some kind, but both have a lot of custom work and things that I haven't gotten a chance to show on this channel before that might give you some ideas for future projects or fun things. So that is what I'm going to talk about. I might use them, swing them around a little bit, and then I will send them back on their merry way to Sword Friend Jon. Now, Sword Friend Jon did mention that he may be willing to sell them, so if you are interested, I'll put his email in the description down below. You can reach out to him to work out the details. He described them as not for sale, but that doesn't necessarily mean for a song. They're all in the thousands of dollar category, so north of $3,000 would probably be the expectation that you would want to set in your mind, and maybe quite far north. But I digress. I'm going to talk about the sword, some of the cool features, and hopefully you find it interesting. Now, the first one that I'm going to talk about is the Chinese manufactured sword, and this being a sword out of China, it has some things that are kind of interesting and some things that are different, but I don't exactly know the whole story behind it. The story Jon was able to recollect was that this was from a person that was working with Angus Trim to design some Japanese swords, and they had some stuff left over that Jon picked up at a show, but I don't think that this one was necessarily designed by Angus Trim or has any kind of nifty story around it. It was just a reasonably well-made blade, wasn't terribly expensive. So it was picked up at a show and then dolled up. And when I say dolled up, it got a lot of interesting stuff. So I'm going to start with the end here. So it has a Tencho style fitting. And this one, Jon wasn't able to clarify if this came this way or was, a byproduct of usage or not. But it has a little swoop on one side of the Tencho fitting and not on the other. So it has like a little saber effect on your pinky. If you squeeze your pinky, it just gives you a little bit of extra purchase there, which I find interesting that it's not on the other hand side that would go into your palm, because that is not particularly comfortable. It has, I believe, Namekawa nubuck leather. It's some sort of very soft, supple leather, and it is very, very tight and well done. So this was done by Joe Ho, I believe, and he tied this leather extremely tight, and it's still exceptionally tight and really well fit and exceptionally well done. It feels really good in the hand, and this leather is very, very cool looking. It feels really soft and supple in the hand. It feels like recliner leather almost, but it also is very tight, and so you don't have this kind of loose, jittery feeling in your hand. It feels very solid and makes a good connection with your hand so that you feel in control of the weapon. Now, I'm really actually very impressed with how tight this is. Now, there are antique fittings on here, some reasonably nice Manuki. I can't make out exactly what they are, but they stand proud on this handle just a little bit. And in this case, when I put my fingers on them, it like my fingers like index over them. They kind of grab on. It gives me like a little purchase, a little extra stoop for my fingers to sit on and feel connected to the sword, which isn't something that I typically have. A lot of times the Manuki that I gun for shoot for a lower profile, and a lot of times if it's bulbous, it doesn't feel right in my hand. Often I prefer they rest in the palms rather than my fingertips. In this case though, my fingers just rest right over them, and really it gives me like a little extra attachment point, and I really happen to like it. Jon described this really well as a consequence of doing things correctly, and so I don't know that was necessarily intentional, but it wasn't not intentional, and it feels really good. Anyway, this is what nubuck leather also looks like. So in terms of talking about projects, if you wrap something in this kind of putty colored leather, then this is how it ages. It absorbs a lot of oil from your hands, and it starts to give this kind of used and worn appearance that happens over time. And this is an example of what that looks like. I think it adds a degree of charm, frankly, to a sword to have that kind of usage on it, but I digress. It is what happens if you use this nubuck leather. And I've shown this leather, I think, on the channel before. It's been a long time, but I haven't shown it as used as this, and so it's interesting to see the patina. It's not the right word, but you get what I'm saying, kind of how it wears over time. This, however, even though it's been used quite a bit, is still exceptionally tight, so the material is good for its intended purpose. If I move up, this has an antique Fuji on it, and it has, it's reasonably nice. It has a rabbit that reminds me of the Dumbo version of rabbit, where it's trying to like take off. It's got such big ears. And then I believe this is called a Tsukashi style Suba. I can't remember exactly what pattern this is, but it's reasonably well done. There's some carving happening here, and it's lightweight and, you know, antique and looks good. Now, this is a very nice handle for a Chinese blade. It's not that the Chinese blades are bad, but they don't generally, you know, this is a significant investment in work for a blade that is a couple $100s, and so it's kind of, it's odd, I guess, is the way I'll put it. But I do happen to really like it, and I'll talk about the blade in a moment. But before I do, I'll talk about this. This is an eggshell scabbard, and so this cracky pattern that you see on here is not an effective paint. It is eggshells that have been very meticulously placed over a blue, like a sky blue or baby blue looking base coat, and then very, very tightly placed. So I believe eggshells were used historically, but it's not a super common thing, and it's also not as common to have them as meticulously placed here. Now, Sword Friend Jon mentioned that this was like a 30-hour endeavor in terms of time. It took a long time to prep and a lot of eggs and his poor colon. But I digress. The basic gist is that this looks really cool, and I can kind of feel like a texture. So it's been painted over, but there's just a little bit of a ledge that you can feel as you run your hands down it, where you can kind of feel the ledge of each of the eggs, and enough of the base coat pokes through where you can kind of tell what color it was underneath. He has also accented this with some green Koiguchi, Kurigata, and Kojiri down at the end here. It's green, and I asked Jon what the plan was there, and he said spring in a bamboo forest, and kind of chuckled a little bit. So I don't think I'm going to offend anyone when I say that the color combination it's a little weird. It's not just a little weird. It's a very strange combination between this scabbard and this handle and this blade. So the blade is a good feeling blade, and then a very laborious process happens on the saya, and then the handle is done up exceptionally well by a very competent person. Like it's an enormous amount of time sink into, and then just some weird colors. It's a funny sword, but I really do happen to dig it. It's a lot of fun, and Japanese swords weren't always black on black with some blacky black and all silver or all gold or something like that for the metal. There was some variety in color, so this is not necessarily a historic thing. I'm not trying to say that, but it wouldn't necessarily be as off if these colors were readily available, I guess. Anyway, moving on to the blade here. It's a really well done blade. That's the short of it. It has well terminated bohi. The polish isn't spectacular by today's standards. The habaki, I believe, was done by Josiah, so it has a really, really nice habaki on it. A simple one, but very, very nice. And it has a kind of a gentle hara, a reasonably nice hamon. This one didn't come out particularly well in the lights that I set up. It was a little finicky to show it, but underneath there's a lot of character in the blade, and this feels really excellent in the hand. It's a very comfortable, the leather being tight and also kind of supple in the hand. It feels really good, and this is a very light and lively feeling sword. I really happen to like actually the way it feels, and the look is quirky, but in an endearing way. Like the handle, this end up doesn't look particularly strange, but the baby blue and green, and yeah, the origins of the blade are just fun. But it's a great example of, well, two interesting things. One, how the nubuck leather ages, and also the eggshell scabbard. This is an incredibly laborious thing, and I would imagine if you're seeking to do it, you're probably going to want to do it yourself, because I'm not sure if anyone's time but your own is worth pursuing a scabbard like it. But the outcome can be quite spectacular. So there is one sword, and I'm not sure, again, who manufactured it. It's from China, the blade is. But anyway, at the same time, the workmanship that was done, Joho did the handle, Josiah did the habaki. I can't remember exactly who did the woodwork, but I believe Josiah might have made the core for the scabbard, or the saya and the handle. Anyway, some of the woodwork, I believe Josiah had a hand in. So very competent, talented people working on this stuff, and it's also got some very nice antique furniture on it. It's a very strange sword, and very, very endearing, and very well put together. And frankly, if you close your eyes and don't look at it, not that it's particularly ugly, but if you close it feels actually really quite compelling. I can see why Jon likes training with it. Okay, the next one I have here is a Rick Barrett sword that has been done up and is also quite interesting. So it has, again, antique Fujikashira. The patina on the Fujikashira has been worn away by some training, and I get the impression that this was silk that was not like lacquered or anything. This has just absorbed a lot of hand oil. Jon must use a lot of lotion. I'm kidding. But this is what silk looks like when you train with a sword a lot. It starts to look like this. It absorbs a lot of hand oil, and it's also still exceptionally tight. Now, the silk I can push slightly, but not really. It's like the top moves around ever so slightly, and that's it. This is still tighter than, well, than just about any other sword that I have around here. It's exceptionally well fit and done, and I like the shape. I like everything about it. Again, the Nuki stand proud a little bit. My fingers just latch right onto them. All the transitions are what you would expect in a really high-end sword, though this one has been used, but is all still put together. Like, it's been driven so much that the paint is coming off, not coming off, but like worn away. But at the same time, it's still all together in all the ways that are important. The Sito still feels rock solid. Everything is still right and tight. The Suba could be tightened just a little bit, but that's about it. It's still holding together. Underneath here, there is Samegawa, and it looks like it's been filled in with, I don't know, more material or painted or something like that. And the channels are less deep, or the space between the nodules is less deep, and so a few of them poke out. It's a style that I've seen on some antique pieces, but not something I see often in swords that are reproduced today. The silk, again, as I mentioned, very tight, feels very good. And I can just see that Jon has trained with this a bit, because like a lot of the patina has started to wear away, and obviously there's a fair amount of sign of handling. As I move up to the Suba, again, this is an antique piece, I believe, and you can see it's a Musashi shape. It has a little bit more texture, these little diamonds that poke out from around where the Fuchi is. It's got a rim around it, which looks to be made of some sort of copper, and it is like the patina or paint or whatever got put on it is beginning to flake off, and it kind of gives this ruggedized look on the sword that I happen to dig. If I move down to the Saya here, so this is a story that Jon told me. So this is Urushi lacquer, and so Urushi is a derivative of poison sumac or poison ivy, and basically you can be highly allergic to it. It can irritate your skin quite a bit when it's in its wet format. And he took charcoal to create this ishime finish, and it has this, like, if you can imagine a worn out sandpaper in like a 60 grit sandpaper that's been worn down. So this doesn't hurt my skin to hold it or move my hands on it, but it's very coarse to the touch. And the Urushi is dry now, but it gave Jon quite a lot of irritation to get to that point. And he did a solid job. There's not like blobby blotches or anything particularly terrible. There's some spots that aren't as consistent, but generally speaking, this is just different. I haven't seen, rare do I see outside of antiques actual Urushi used. And then this charcoal kind of finish on here is also not something that I really see done, but I happen to like the texture. A lot of times it's this kind of very fine stone finish, and it doesn't have the feeling that this does in hand. So I happen to think that this is worthy of considering. There's just not anyone really reproducing something like this today that I've felt, and so it'd be worth checking out to see if it's a possibility. I don't know if this was a desirable effect in antique swords or not, or if this was considered more crude, but as a practitioner, like, I happen to really like it. And this sword has obviously been well used, but it's really held up well. Like, the scabbard is not dinged up. There's no, stuff isn't falling off of it and whatnot. So it seems to do what it's supposed to do. Now, the blade is a blade from Rick Barrett, and it's one of his later works. There's very clean, nice lines on it. The polish this one came out a lot better in the light that I was able to get on the sword. And it has a very, erratic, kind of choji madare, I think is what the pattern is called, but it's a little bit more wild. I happen to like Rick's earlier stuff where he had like controlled chaos. It was large and flamboyant and had like erratic stuff going on, but seemed to all be a little bit more intentional. So this is not as much my favorite. At the same time, it's a reasonably nice looking sword. I'm not going to complain about it. It's pretty. It also has a habaki by Josiah. Now, Sword Friend Jon mentioned that this is Shibuichi, and it's one of the better habaki that he's seen Josiah do. I can certainly say that this is a very handsome habaki. Josiah has worked in Shibuichi before, and that's, I believe, a mixture, an alloy between copper and silver, and it can mix together and come out in different colors. This has, how would I describe it? Like, it leans a little bit more on the copper side, I guess I would say, in terms of coloration. The patina is darker, maybe almost bronzy in the way bronze can be aged or patinated, but I have seen Josiah make Shibuichi that has this almost graphite gray look with an undertone of like military green, and I really love how he gets that patina out of some variety of Shibuichi he can make. But this is also very, very handsome. I really like the look of the habaki. It's substantial. Jon has described this as well as like man jewelry in the past, and I recall that from one of his videos that he took down on the internet that I wish he'd put back up. But I can see that here. It's a very pretty piece of jewelry on the sword. Josiah did a really solid job. He always does on habaki, but this is absolutely an exceptional habaki. Anyway, the sword itself also feels nice. It feels a little bit more substantial, but not as large as some of Rick's blades have. It's not as chungus-y, I guess I would say. Also, just very handsome, very nice. There are, it doesn't look like Jon has dinged it up. There's not cutting scratches insofar as I can tell, but there are some minor little spots of rust that are creeping in. So before I package these back up, I'll get them nice and coated up with oil and cleaned up and whatnot. Anyway, those are the two swords that Jon has sent my way to share with you. And I hope you've enjoyed seeing them, because they're the examples that are here. The urushi scabbard with charcoal that has that texture on it is super cool, and not something that I've been able to show on this channel before, as is the eggshell scabbard. Those are both things that two different styles that I believe are historic or have some roots in history anyway, and I have not had the pleasure of showing one on the channel before, not the pleasure of feeling one either. And I happen to really like that urushi with the charcoal, that textural feeling. It doesn't feel like it would impede being used in your obi, or that it would be a problematic, but when you hold it, you instantly feel in control of it. And it's not that like my scabbard slipping around is problematic, but I really like it when I grab onto an object that involves a 4-foot razor blade and I immediately feel in control of it. And that charcoal scabbard kind of does that. Also, both handles are tied really well and show great examples of how well the material holds up, or what you can expect them to look like if you use them pretty frequently for EI, which is, I believe, what Sword Friend Jon is doing. Anyway, yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed the tour. Jon, special thanks to you for sending these my way. Both of them feel really nice. Both of them have lessons to teach, and I really appreciate them being on loan to share. I hope all of you sword friends watching did as well. That's all I've got, though. Cheers, and thanks for watching.